Welcome, everybody. Let me shut down the music real quick. So welcome, everybody, to episode 5 of our ongoing series, SaaS Monday, live on Fridays. If you guys don't know, there is a LinkedIn community that we're building in partnership with other SaaS architects from around the world called SaaS Monday on LinkedIn, as well as some YouTube places as well. We do have our first live event kind of tied to that series, in which you can join us in San Francisco, live at AWS in San Francisco headquarters on May 6th, where we're going to be talking with a bunch of AI founders and AI leaders from AWS on the best way to design and build AI applications in 2025, and specifically on AWS. And in the topic of building AI applications and launching new offers, I am proud to be co-hosting this session with two amazing founders, in Kamal Gupta, founder and CEO of Omnistrate, and Adam. Adam, why don't you kind of tell your story and kind of introduce who you're here to represent, because I'm not going to do it justice, and then we'll kind of dive in.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, super excited to be here. So I'm Adam Nolte. I'm the co-founder CTO at AutoBlocks. And so what we do is, we help companies test and evaluate their AI products and try to make the process as deterministic as possible. And so, we do that through a variety of ways of helping you build thousands of simulations in various scenarios that you can use to test your agents, how they might behave in real world scenarios, so you can understand how that's going to behave when you move to production. And then, as well as tying into production observability, making sure once it's in production, is it performing like you expect it to, and then using all of that data, to kind of create this feedback loop from production, what's happening there, and back into your testing scenario, and allowing experts and everybody on the team to collaborate and interact with that along the way. And so, I'm, like I mentioned, the co-founder CTO, so overseeing all the product and engineering and building the platform. We're a few years old at this point and have had a fun journey thus far.
Love it. And very much appreciate you joining us. And part of the conversation we're going to have today is kind of the tools you've used to help you along the journey. One of the tools you've used to help you along the journey is the Omnistrate platform, which was kind of created in the brain of Kamal way back when. And so I don't think in this series we've actually had a chance to discuss, as we're talking about founders and the founder story, Kamal, I don't think we've actually had a chance to kind of discuss why you chose to found Omnistrate. And do you want to dive into that just real quick? Because I think it does kind of tie into, how AutoBlocks and Omnistrate met in market, and, and where we're going from here.
Yeah, I mean, I started my journey back at AWS, and early days of 2007, 2008, we were, coining AWS around that time. There were few services. We used to call it foundational web services inside AWS. At the time, it was not public yet, and we were looking for ways to, how do you now really just take a software and shrink wrap it around with some sort of management layer, right? To essentially convert, so we don't have to put people behind it, and we can put machines behind it. And I think there was a common saying at that time to convert atoms into bits, right, inside AWS, to basically find ways to do the machines do the job, instead of managing whatever it is today we talk about agents, but at those days, cache, the caching products or the database products or any object whatsoever, and when you're selling to B2B, you essentially need a mechanism to be able to represent customers, your subscriptions, their deployments, and to manage the deployments around it. And so we're looking for ways, and we built something called control plane at that time, and we named it control plane. I think the control plane historically has the word also has some connotation in different industries, especially networking. And from there, the what happened was, like, every product I worked with, we were working on building an application, and then came the control plane. And so I kind of did like half a dozen, maybe a dozen times, and then went to conference, and yet again the same thing. And so thought to just make it simple for everyone. It shouldn't be, seemed like the whole industry just reinventing the wheel again and again and again. And it talked to a lot of founders in the valley, in around the country. And it seems to be it's turned out to be a common challenge where it's not something which is part of their application, but it's something that everybody has to do. And it's one of those things that requires a bit of different expertise in terms of operating infrastructure in the cloud. And thought that the abstractions provided by the cloud providers today are pretty low level, and we need a uniform abstraction over all the cloud provider to make it easy for everyone to just essentially build their SaaS product. And through this technological control plane, which is essentially managing the deployments and managing the cloud operations, doing billing and things like that, and just shrink wrap it around all the cloud providers. So make it easy for everyone to build their B2B business and be able to sell it to their customers.
Love it. And so, Adam, first I want to say, when Kamal's saying he was trying to get changed bits or atoms to bits, it wasn't personal. He really does still like you too. But as the Omnistrate story says, hey, listen, they went out and found a thing that everyone kept doing that was making building a business hard, and tried to solve that problem for them so that people wouldn't have to solve it for themselves, and they could go focus on something else. Now, it's kind of my understanding that that's kind of a core to what you guys are doing for AI. And so can you kind of dive in a little bit deeper in terms of, what parts of that, building and leveraging AI for your customers are you making it easier for?
Yeah, definitely. And so, to kind of go back, even a little bit to when we started AutoBlocks, right? At the time it was similar, right around the time when ChatGPT came out, and my co-founder Haroon, he has background in machine learning, data science, and a data science degree from Berkeley, and we started putting our heads together, working on some projects, and even saw firsthand at the companies we were at, as the massive progressions in LLMs and AI technologies, that this was going to create a whole new paradigm for businesses that are going to be adding these capabilities to their product. And they may not have the full expertise of how to work with LLMs, how to understand how they behave. It's very different than traditional software development, where if you put a button up there and you say, when you click this button, go do this thing, and it's always going to do that thing. If it doesn't, that's a pretty easily reproducible bug. Where now with LLMs, you're introducing all this unpredictability, which is a feature of them, and that's what allows them to be so creative and powerful in these functions. And so what we did is we started having conversations, like I mentioned, even the companies we were at, there was more and more pressure coming in from customers on, hey, ChatGPT came out, other competitors are starting to add these AI features, where are you at? Companies didn't have the skill set in-house of working with these, and through conversations really saw there's going to need to be a set of developer tools for helping these product teams build and understand how these things are performing. How do you test? How before you go to production, how do you have confidence that you're not going to release this unpredictable thing into the wild, and kind of put it at least into a bit of a predictable box and make sure it's going to behave as you expect. And then from there, what we continue to see is another kind of shift in that not only was it the product teams that were involved in this process, but more and more subject matter experts on the team. So in the healthcare setting, that could be clinicians, nurses. They're reviewing the outputs. They have the expertise on, hey, here is a good output from an LLM. They want to provide that feedback. And then not only in providing feedback, they also want to be involved in the process of building the prompts to the LLMs and actually iterating on this system themselves, which is very different than traditional software development. And then building this whole entire system and workflow and kind of the infrastructure for orchestrating this workflow is very time consuming, and it really distracts from our customers core value prop, right? What we want to do is enable them to be able to iterate faster, bring these use cases with AI that they're imagining to life, and do it in a way that is safe, predictable, and they're confident. Because what we continue to see is companies are starting with one or two use cases, they see success, and now those use cases are continuing to expand, and they're finding more opportunities across their business, both internal and external. And we can help accelerate that roadmap for them.
Love it. And so there's kind of a common theme here, which is there's a lot of LLMs, there's a lot of data, there's a lot of there's a need to get the LLMs to the data, and then there's just choices that we have to make in terms of how we're going to merge or to marry the LLM to the data, and how we're going to kind of manage the data flowing out of it. And so our customers are making that choices, we are making that choices, and our partners in terms of our cloud providers are making those choices. And so we're seeing those choices along the way. And so kind of one of the first choices I kind of want to talk about, and then we'll start from building out your offer with Omnistrate, and then we'll get into some of those same kind of choices in terms of decisions. So another word for choice in the software world is kind of build or buy. And so as you started to build out your SaaS offer around AutoBlocks, you had a lot of choices to make, in terms of what pieces of this are you going to buy, what pieces of this are you going to build. One of the earlier partners you chose was Omnistrate for that. And so if you wouldn't mind, a little selfish plug on my part, can you talk to us about what drove you to pick out a partner like Omnistrate to help build with?
Yeah, definitely. So in those very early days of AutoBlocks, when we were kind of still proving out the concept, figuring out, is this something people will pay for? Where is the right areas to focus on? The priority there was speed to market. How quick can we get things up? And so to begin, we started out with just using some simple serverless offerings on AWS, like AWS Lambda, SQS, all usage based, using technologies like Cloudflare Workers, just get the data in to our product, right? And then our customers started seeing value, but very quickly, especially with our focus in healthcare, the requirement came up around the strict data privacy, data residency requirements, and so we started very early on getting questions on, hey, can I host AutoBlocks into our cloud? We want to control all of the data, and so where we had been to date, we had just used, was quick, use these serverless offerings, all of that, but that made it very hard to take that and say, okay, we're going to deploy this. We're using a variety of services. How do we package this up? How do we deploy this into our customers' cloud and let them use it? And my background had been, all in building cloud SaaS platforms that weren't self-hosted as well. So I actually remembered Kamal had reached out to me over LinkedIn. I think it was like a month prior to when I even initiated the call. I was like, hey, are you thinking about self-hosting or bring your own cloud? And I just hopped off a sales call where somebody asked that same question. I go, I'm gonna message this guy back and let's see what they're up to over there. And really quickly kind of saw the value. Went from not only the product itself, but just the education I think that was provided on hey, here's how other folks do this in the industry. Here's how they support this bring your own cloud concept. Here's how to package it, price it. Here's how we can also help your internal SaaS offering that are our managed SaaS offering as well. And it became pretty clear, there's a ton of complexity under the hood. That's not, I mentioned earlier, our customers, they don't want to spend time building all this infrastructure to orchestrate these human reviews, the production observability, tying that back to test cases. We manage that for them so they can focus on their product. we didn't want to spend time building out the control plane, all the services around how do we manage these deployments into our customers' clouds, how do we schedule upgrades, make sure things aren't breaking. We didn't want to, for a small team at our stage, that would have taken up all of our time. So it's a pretty clear decision, to work with Omnistrate there. And, not only like I mentioned, the product, but the education, the support along the way, and, helping even with security questionnaires has been a real win. And, our customers that have those requirements are happy, and it makes our sales conversations, going forward, that we have, multiple different types of offerings that we can offer. It just makes that question now where before it was a non-starter if we didn't support it. Now it's a pretty simple check the box. And then from our perspective, our team doesn't need to spend any time managing that infrastructure, building out that control plane. We're spending all of our time actually building and iterating on our product.
Love it. And so one of the things you did say in that was BOIC, and your ability to actually just deploy AutoBlocks to your customer and bring it to your customer. I do want to double click on that here in a second. I do think it's really important. But one of the things I do want to shout out that right after ChatGPT came out, a whole bunch of AI startups just suddenly popped up, and we suddenly got a lot of calls from a lot of AI startups. Very few of them have actually progressed all the way to where you guys are, where they actually have offers in market and having real customer conversations. And so I do want to shout out that first give you a shout out that says it's pretty impressive what you guys have done. But second, I also kind of want to give, ask Kamal here, because he's talked to kind of more of the AI startups out there than almost anyone else I know. What excites you kind of about what we're seeing the AutoBlocks guys do, and what is there any kind of things that we're learning that we're seeing in terms of the successful AI startups and the non? One of the things Adam said is, hey, we're focusing on the things that differentiate us. So are there learnings that we can see so far in terms of why AutoBlocks was able to get here and we've seen so many others kind of stall?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the big differences Adam mentioned, right? Adam had prior experience, and he had hands-on experience of building infrastructure and building SaaS products in the past, and so he understood from his prior background that this is something that you just cannot build a scrappy version of it. I mean, and it is something that will take time and energy, and it requires expertise. And although it's something that some businesses, or especially B2B businesses, do need, it's not something which is core to the application. And the reality is that in today's world, what matters is like how quickly you can build your app, how quickly you can innovate, and how quickly you can just go and find the product market fit and win your customers, rather than focusing on things that are not core to your business. I mean, when businesses start today, do we build our own operating systems? Do we build our own databases? In fact, do we build even our own auth layer or observability? No, not really. But if you go back in time, businesses used to do that. And so the times have shifted and times have changed. And if this was 15 years ago when first control plane was built, then that was a different equation. Nobody knew, and things like that. But I mean, industry has been building for now more than a decade the control plane. So, and there have been hundreds and hundreds of organizations have successfully built it. So it's just time to realize that we basically need a proper abstraction and acknowledge that. The second part of it, I would just quickly add that, which is it's just the kind of thing that takes just time and energy. And if you're not going to put the time and attention to it because you're focusing on building on core of your app, and start basically relying upon a particular tool or something to which is not meant for building the proper control plane, then you will have to go back, and very quickly you will realize it after a couple of customers that that's not going to work. And in the past, Adam has been spot on. Like in the past, whenever we have tried to short circuit it around, we have to go back and pay the price for that. And so building like building databases or proper databases, having a proper database is not a choice. It's needed. The same way the control planes, especially for B2B companies, is not a choice. It's something that all cloud companies, all B2B cloud companies do need to have control planes, and it's a must. And it's just not. It's not a differentiator. And if anybody, in fact, I would say that if any B2B business relies upon control plane as being their differentiator, then they don't have a business. That's as simple as that.
Okay, so while I've got, again, two founders here to talk through, and two founders who are just emerging from the initial rush of, hey, I found product market fit, now I got to go figure out my go-to-market. Is there some learnings or advice that, so Adam, I'll start with you, as it comes to product market fit, when you're designing out your product and the rest? And so I do want to get, back into our, the topic we're having, which is BYOC and the rest, but I've got two founders here. I can't not ask. When you're designing your product, when you were figuring it out, how did you kind of say, hey, here's how I know I have product market fit? What's the learnings you found to kind of build out design, for other founders who happen to be listening in here, what was the things you wish someone would have told you?
Yeah. I think that, the key things are, it's pretty cliche to say, but being really close to your users and especially those early champions. But it's also sometimes that can also be a distraction if you don't have the right users, right, as well. So it's not only listening direct one-to-one on we need this feature, we need this feature, we need this feature. It's taking all of that, being really close to everybody, understanding where are your champions, where are you succeeding well, and maybe where your product maybe just isn't the right fit, and being okay with that, and you're kind of analyzing all of that information and doubling down on where the product is doing well, where it's succeeding, what are their use cases, why is it succeeding there, what is it that they want, how do we find the commonalities across all of those where it's doing well, and then understanding like, hey, for some places maybe it wasn't the right fit, and that's okay, that's part of it, and that's what we don't need to prioritize certain things in that area because it is a distraction. Let's focus on what's working well, what are their use cases, how do we continue to kind of build that out and accelerate and find more folks like that, and really continue to find those champions, because I think it's really easy, especially if you're a first-time founder, to say, all right, I'm getting feedback, and I'm getting all this feedback, and I need to take it all, word for word, and this is exactly, what I should be doing, because you read a lot of things that are, listen to users, hear what they have to say, be really close. But it's not always, it's not that cut and dry. It's, you do have to spend some time, and that involves taking a step back sometimes, and really zooming out and looking across everything outside of just that day-to-day of you just hopped off a feedback call, and looking at the analyzing. And that's where even LLMs kind of help with that. Even now, it's helping you to understand and utilizing ChatGPT and the tools at your disposal to analyze all this great information that you have out there. So that would kind of be I think the big piece as you navigate it, and finding what's working, finding what's not, and continuing to experiment, having hypotheses of, hey, we think this is the right direction to go down. How do we experiment with that as quickly as possible, and then figure out, was that a success or a fail? Why did it succeed? Why did it fail? And continue to kind of double down and proliferate from there.
Love it. And so one of the topics we were going to come back to is BYOC, but I do think it ties into the listening to your customers and adjusting for product market fit. So Kamal, can you kind of walk us through, because when you were building out Omnistrate originally, supporting the BYOC or BYOA model, or allowing a customer to run the fully managed app within the customer tenant, we knew that was important, but we didn't necessarily know how important it was going to be. So can you kind of walk us through kind of making that adjustment, why it's so important, especially for our AI customers, and kind of how we got there, again, from the founder's perspective of just listening to our customers?
Definitely. I think if you look at the history of BYOA or BYOC model, traditionally, if you go back a few years back, there are two prominent models. One is a fully hosted model where you're taking a B2B app, you're deploying the entire app along with the infrastructure directly in your account, and essentially offering your customers an endpoint. And so that was the original promise of the SaaS, which basically saying, hey, look, customers, you don't have to worry about deploying an app, owning an infrastructure. All you get is an endpoint, and you just have to work on top of the endpoint, and you're done, right? And that's as clean as that. What happened with the advent of the AI, though, is that mindset or that paradigm from fully hosted to BYOC, where the application is deployed in customer's account, completely shifted from one to another. And the reason for that is it turned out the vendors realized that they don't have the end customers at the end of the day realize that they're not procuring one or two software. They have to procure hundreds and thousands of these agents. And when you're doing that, you can't be just taking data and giving it to everyone, and trying to manage the security around it. And so naturally forces were aligned in such a way, especially with in the era of agents, where agents are doing kind of like have a microservices kind of a thing where it does one thing. It's agents are something which is small, and they tend to do one thing, and you can build collection of them, and get the all different work done from different agents. But if you imagine having thousands of agents being used by enterprises, now you need a mechanism where you have the processing power, which is the agent, whatever they're doing, come to you, rather than you bring and giving out all the data and managing the access control across thousands of these SaaS vendors. And so naturally it invited the model and inverted the model in many ways. And the industry shifted just between 2023 and 2024 from fully hosted to BYOC, where all the enterprises are now asking to move their agents to their account, and that way they can retain the control of the data. They can retain who is working on what, and there's one place where everything happens, and the PII data never leaves out of their account. Much easier to manage and much easier to control, and from the security point of view, et cetera, et cetera. So that I would say is a little bit of the history and the context. So it wasn't that when we started Omnistrate, it wasn't that BYOC was the model of that era. I think just with the advent of ChatGPT, and especially with the agents, now the industry has shifted towards BYOC, and so we see a lot more companies doing BYOC as opposed to.
Yeah, and I think even to add on to that, kind of something we see too with the need for BYOC is, I think with LLMs in the AI era, data is so important, and data starts to become like gold. And so companies start to become even more and more protective of that, as various companies are maybe starting to, as they're iterating on their product, that is part of their differentiator is their data. And they, don't want to expose that, to anybody, even vendors. They want to keep all of that in their cloud and, keep it in their vault, so to speak, because that is their goal.
Yeah, the other pattern, by the way, we also notice, Adam, is that service providers realize that by doing the fully hosted, they're essentially reselling some part of the cloud. And they, especially in the early phase of their growth, they're not going to get the same level of discounts from the cloud providers that the enterprises or their customers can get. And so rather than them trying to compete in that, or getting the hardware, paying the higher price to the cloud provider, and then try to resell it, they will never be competitive. Instead, they said, okay, let me do the BYOC, where you buy the infrastructure. Anyways, you can get much cheaper than I can. All right. And it allows them to not only provide better security, but also from the cost perspective as well. That's my bigger point is. So it just turned out the forces are more aligned that. And so we see more and more BYOC SaaS these days than fully hosted.
And so, Adam, bringing it back to the AutoBlocks story, but not too far back. One of your core features that you guys announced a little while ago, and I was pretty excited when I saw you launch it. I think I've watched the video 2 or 3 times now. Your deployment portal, and what deployment portal allows you to do from an AutoBlocks perspective in supporting the customers and making sure that the agents you're helping them build go to meet the customer's data where it is. Can you talk about AutoBlocks deployment portal and why it's kind of a differentiator for you?
Yeah, definitely. Like I mentioned earlier, in those sales cycles, before we offered BYOC and Omnistrate was, involved, the self-hosting BYOC was a pretty big discussion point in sales conversations. And now with Omnistrate and our BYOC offering, And as part of that, our deployment portal, it becomes a check the box. And so it's really easy now where when that comes up in conversations, we can say, hey, yeah, we offer BYOC. We have a complete portal where you can deploy AutoBlocks into your cloud with just a few clicks. And you also have observability on how it's performing, how it's behaving, audit logs on, as we've deployed AutoBlocks into your cloud, like when that happened, when things stopped working. And because the reality is, AutoBlocks, we become a core part of our customers' workflows. Pre-production, they're running tests, our agents, our simulation scenarios. That's how they know that they're safe to deploy to their customers is using our product. And then also with some of our features around prompt management and managing those prompts going to LLM, that is critical to their application running. So it's really important that not only that from the operational point of view that they're confident as we deploy into their cloud and our offering that it's going to stay up versus some other if you think about alternatives of trying to run the deployment themselves, manage things themselves, or something that was just scrapped, some kind of control plane scrapped together. They're confident now, and with our deployment portal, few clicks, complete understanding of how things are behaving, when things have happened, and make it really easy to operationalize from their perspective.
Love it. And then, so if we can double click on that one more time. So AutoBlocks is helping customers, or helping your customers, increase the reliability and trustworthiness and security of the AI that they're delivering out there. So a lot of us are thinking, hey, I've got an AI and I'm going to ask it a question and it's going to give me an answer, and it may or may not hallucinate on the answer, but it's going to give me an answer. Why is security and reliability? Why do I need to care? So what are the concerns, and what's the problem, and what are we trying to solve for there?
Yeah, definitely. If you think about it in like, for example, a healthcare setting, where some of our customers, they're using AI to help accelerate their people at their company that are helping patients, things like that, right? There's still that human in the loop, but it's a back office. But as long as that's performing reliably in that person, that person's able to provide a much better level of care to their patients, because they're able to quickly get all the context on that patient, do it accurately, do it reliably, way better than they had been before, where there's a lot of manual piece, right? We still have that human in the loop. And if you also think of other settings where we're seeing AI being applied, for example, in insurance and helping to process claims and things like that, and information gathering. Again, reliability of understanding, like, hey, when we have this claim, this evidence, all of this, we need to be confident that we're providing the right suggestion on how, what verdict to make on this. Like I said, there's still that human in the loop, but providing that all the right context reliable to that human is extremely important. And then the security piece, obviously, in these industries like healthcare, finance, legal, like that data is also extremely sensitive. There's tons of legal ramifications as well, to make sure if you're not handling this data correctly, there's real legal consequences on top of that, outside of just being a good steward of the data. So that's kind of some of the big pieces we see there, and the importance of it.
And so I do see a lot of people in the AI world kind of throw in the human in the loop reference, and I do think that requires a little bit of double clicking, because I think there's the belief that the human loop can just be a regular programmer like me, and I'm going to look at the prompt. You guys are saying no, that needs to be an expert in the loop, and solving for expert in the loop and solving for expert feedback is different than just having your data analyst looking at something. And so, can you talk us through a little bit of what that means?
Yeah, definitely. I think there's a lot of products where directional accuracy, or that 80% is okay, right? If you think of creative examples, creative use cases of AI, where hallucinations and things being made up is sometimes a good thing and a feature. But a lot of the customers we work with, that last 20% of getting to that 100% reliability is really important. And so those are often in like the regulated industries like healthcare, legal, finance, where you need that last 20%, and the best way to get there is going to be with the expert, the subject matter experts for whatever that use case is. So in healthcare, that might be the actual doctors, clinicians. They're going to have the understanding. If you think about it, the product engineering team, typically don't have medical backgrounds. They're not going to be able to know as they're building the product, like, hey, is this right? Is this not? They need to rely on someone with the expertise in that field to be able to do that. And that, like I said, applies across other regulated industries like legal, for example. You need lawyers, things like that, to actually review, provide feedback. Now, obviously, the flip side of that is their time is really expensive, right? Experts are really, really expensive. Their time is very precious. So, kind of part of what we offer is, as you have humans in the loop, we can help gather all that feedback and ideally reduce the amount of time that you need to rely on those experts. They'll always, kind of believe they'll always be a part of the system, but how can we help make their time, even more valuable, make it easier for them to, provide that feedback, that expertise? How do we collect all that in a centralized place? Because on the topic of data, that feedback is also extremely important. You can, imagine a lot of our customers, as these experts are giving feedback on what's working well, what's not working well, as they iterate on that, that's kind of part of their differentiator as well. If they're doing all that in an organized way, and that's what we help facilitate.
I think that makes a lot of sense. I think it's a tremendous value, and I would probably guess that adding or taking a little bit of time from your true experts like your doctors and the rest might be somewhat expensive, but it's going to be a lot less expensive than having your programmer guess and pretend to be a doctor when they're trying to do that training. And so to put that in perspective, one of the things that Connell, you've told me, and I wouldn't mind if you'd expanded on a little, is, you've been in the development world forever. You've been, helping people code out things forever. One of the things you're saying is that the AI tools today are making your good developers better, but there's always a chance it's making some of the bad developers think they're good and they're not. And so how do you, just from a founder's point of view, Kamal, how do you, because you've been spending a lot of time, figuring out where to put AI in all these different tools, or where to input AI into your business, and obviously development is a huge place for it. The lessons you're learning in terms of where is AI a good fit, and where do you actually absolutely have to have your expert?
Yeah, I mean, I first I would start with saying that I think I'll echo the point of Adam, right? It's super important to, as you're thinking about taking AI, putting in different parts of the function, whether it's sales, whether it's marketing, whether other areas of engineering or a product, it's important that you are evaluating tools, and even as part of that. And so it's super important for people who are building tools to get these things right, because that's often the challenge with a lot of the AI tooling out there, is how accurate they are, and whether they are providing the results. All from the functionality perspective, everybody works, but I think the key differentiation that people, at least from a consumer point of view, that we are looking for is something that the tool should do what it's supposed to do, and should get the results most of the time right. And it's often takes time and energy today, I think, in several verticals to get that right. And I think there's a lot of ways, and I'm actually very excited about what AutoBlocks is doing. And I think there's a huge need for the industry to really take a look at and have a platform like AutoBlocks to be able to evaluate their product and make sure that it's actually well tested, and it really works for a large variety of the use cases. So to answer a little bit, moving on to the question precisely, or to the question that, Michael, you were asking, I think the efficiency is one of the things that, from the founder point of view, that we've started looking at a little bit more carefully, because what AI has essentially done is made each one of us more effective in what we do, or that is a premise, at least. And whether we are looking at, take a look at any part of the sales process, take a look at the marketing processes, take a look at the way how we do the development today, take a look at how we do product design. all of them are influenced today with the AI and some sort of AI tooling, and so that the aspect that you need large teams to be able to make do something in really innovative is gone are the days. And I think AI is just making it more and more easier to from getting an idea to getting something out there in front of the customers to make it something usable. And so I think the future is going to be less about doing uh, the mundane part of the jobs. The future is going to be more about being innovative. Can is your solution serving your customers, and finding the product market fit, and constantly innovating. And you can't just be relaxed that you build the product and nobody else can build it. I think the future is going to be where once you build the product, you have to constantly iterate and constantly innovate on behalf of your customers, and build an amazing thing and continue serving your community. And that's how I see it. So impact on the customer side, impact obviously internally also. From the efficiency point of view, I expect that large businesses will be built in the future with very fewer workforces. And but I also see on the other side that a lot more businesses will be built successful, because the cost of building a business has gone down compared to what was there before. So I mean, and we saw that, like, how many companies or how many founders try to build a hardware business? Very few. There's a reason for that. How many founders try to build software? It was much easier to do the software business. And I think the way that transition happened from hardware to software, the same transition is happening from software to now AI world. And I think a lot more businesses. So it's not like I am saying that they will not, the software engineers won't have jobs. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that it's going to actually boom the industry. There will be more use cases. The world will be a much better place. There will be a lot more businesses, but each business, you can now build a scalable business much smaller entity or workforce. So and I think all future founders and executives should look out for efficiency as one of the key metric. And it's
one of my favorite use cases I've heard from AI recently was one of my enterprise friends who's been running an enterprise IT shop forever. He has one of those legacy systems that everyone was afraid to touch because the guy who wrote the code left forever ago. It was old code. And one of the things they did is actually just drop the code into ChatGPT and say, hey, comment on this and tell me what this code is doing. And so they finally used it not to build something new, but to understand something that was running forever ago. And it solved an amazing situation. So Adam, there's another piece that I really recommend our leader about AutoBlocks, especially you have a blog post out there talking about the LLM infrastructure and all the different tools that are out there in the AI space and all the different tools you can use it for it. I think it's a brilliant piece of information. I highly recommend other people go out there. I highly recommend our folks do it, and I'll post it in our comments, a link to the blog. But can you kind of talk about, because at the end of the day, AutoBlocks is a tool to help with LLM and AI. And so can you kind of talk through where does AutoBlocks fit in that kind of the overall AI tooling world? And what are the other kind of core other tools that you guys kind of interact with?
Yeah, great question. There's a lot of tools. There's been an explosion, I think, just around AI in general, right? As its usage has continued to grow, and I think will obviously continue to proliferate across various industries and companies. The way we like to think about ourselves is, as a kind of a full platform to help. As you build your product. I talked a little bit earlier about that workflow of connecting the subject matter experts, folks that are outside of engineering, back to the engineers and creating a feedback loop there. It's really kind of at the core of what we do. And I think one of the other philosophies that we've taken as we've built AutoBlocks is that we don't want to get in our customers' way. So we've been very intentional about how we've built the product, where we can sit alongside your code. We can integrate very easily into your code base. We're built also on top of primitives like open telemetry, it's industry standards, things like that, so that you can use the tools that you want, whether you want to go use OpenAI models, you want to use Anthropic models, you want to use some open source models off the shelf. You're free to do that. You can do that. We won't ever prevent you from doing that. You can continue to test, iterate with all these various things. And we're there to help you understand as you're doing that, is it working better or is it not working so well? And then, on your comment too on tools, as new frameworks that come out for building with AI, like code SDKs, things like that, we remain flexible, and we always will, so that you can test those out, use those. We sit more on that higher level of, hey, here are the results. Here's what the outputs were. Help you understand, was this good? Was this better than before? Are you regressing? Providing the right interfaces so that you can expose the parts of your code, like prompts, to folks on your team that maybe aren't developers, that want to be able to test, interact with that, run those tests through code, keep code as the source of truth for all of this. And then also the interfaces for that feedback on, hey, was this a good output? Was this a bad output? Being able to associate that back to, what tools were you using at that time? What models were you using? When we said things were bad, when they said things weren't good, and then using all of that data to provide insights, kind of into how things are performing for you. And the name AutoBlocks is also really intentional. It is a set of building blocks. I've mentioned a few, like our testing framework, our prompt management framework, production observability, this like human in the loop, expert review, building simulations. A lot of our customers they'll start integrating with one block, and then as you kind of adopt them, the whole platform all works together to provide you really seamlessly the insights and facilitate this whole workflow.
Love it. And as we've kind of thrown around the term LLM and ChatGPT and Anthropic and some of the open source choices or model choices, can you kind of talk us? So we did say we started earlier. Hey, ChatGPT came out, and suddenly the world's discovered AI. When in reality we've all been using AI forever. These models have been out forever, but ChatGPT was better. I mean, we just suddenly saw this. Wow, this LLM is good. And now we've figured, hey, the world's it's one, can't get any better than that. DeepSeek comes out and says, hold my beer, and suddenly we're off into a race. And so can you kind of talk about the evolution of that, and should we expect that to continue? So, I mean, is there one LLM to rule them all, or do we continue to need to experiment and test which one's right for us?
Yeah. No, it's a great point. And I think even to connect it back, you were talking a little bit about the explosion of companies around when ChatGPT came out. Some have stuck around, and some have kind of gone by the wayside. And to tie that back to the AutoBlocks story, my co-founder Haroon, his background's in, like I mentioned, machine learning, data science, and he has been in the space for a long time. And you're exactly right. Like companies have been, building with AI, machine learning models, all of that for a while. Consumers have been exposed to that, just maybe not in the way that they now are with ChatGPT and LLMs. And Haroon actually had founded AI for Anyone, a nonprofit that was teaching underprivileged communities about AI. So we had been in the space for a long time, which I think has kind of led to us, still being around in the space now a few years later, having that prior knowledge as well. And as you kind of looked, as you mentioned, looking to the future, the way we see it is, I think the use of models, obviously the closed source models like OpenAI, Anthropic, they're going to continue to evolve and iterate. But I think we'll continue to see different models that are good at specific use cases. So we may see models that are better at specific healthcare use cases or legal use cases, finance use cases. And as it becomes easier to, even maybe build your own models, I'm not sure the space moves so fast. It's hard to predict, even what's going to happen tomorrow, keeps us all on our toes, which is what's fun and exciting. But, we kind of believe, I think models will continue to proliferate. You might have specialized models that are really good at certain things. Generalized models might work well, but it'll take time to kind of find, tweak them, get the prompts right for your specific use cases. And they all are different, even as OpenAI is releasing its new models like O3 and 4.0, the way you prompt them has a massive impact on the output and the results that you get. And the same thing could lead to wildly different things. And so that's why using a tool like AutoBlocks is going to continue to be so important in the future as new models, as new things advance. Making sure as you test those out, maybe you have latency sensitive environments where you want to use a model that's faster, but it's not as smart, so to speak, or not as good at certain tasks. You need to make sure it's fast and good at the one thing you want it to do. So we believe they'll continue to kind of grow, proliferate both open source, closed source, and it'll be a fun next few years as the past few have already been.
Love it. And I think a big chunk of that's going to tie down to how good your data is. And so the LLM tied to data. And so it's kind of fun because Kamal, you kind of started in the early days of bringing data together, and some of the first services you were building at AWS were all kind of the concept of let's centralize the data so we can make better decisions. And with RDS and all the other services you built, and now that all this data is in one, we've started to get as a society much better job of consolidating our data. Now we've got these LLMs doing some really fun and interesting things against it.
Yeah, I mean, I would also say that some parts of it is also repeating, which is like the way we brought in how we take any application and sell it as a cloud service and bring the concept of multi-tenancy. I think the same thing will happen in that. I would expect even in the agentic world or the AI world, because as you were asking question, there's one dimension where these LLMs will get specific to the industry, and as Adam was pointing out, but then there's another element about these agents or LLMs will also get specific to a tenant or an individual, right? And so and these things are constantly learning, and they become personal, and so it's just and then the notion of that multi-tenancy that we solved essentially with the control plane will eventually also come to the AI world as well, and it's already there, I guess. It's not even, and so I think the history has told us the computer science problem, the fundamentals problems doesn't change. I think the application of them as the industry overall is moving, we continue to apply the same set of principles again and again. It's so funny to watch. Look back in hindsight, like, damn, all over again.
Love it, and I agree. I mean, the one thing that we've learned about the computer industry in general is we are very cyclical, and we see the systems expand and contract, and then we tend to find ourselves on some of the same paths again and again, although it's a different journey every time, and it's always kind of fun. And so we've reached the top of the hour, as always. Really enjoyed it. Before I do check off, though, Adam, if someone wants to get a hold of AutoBlocks and kind of learn more, kind of what's the best way to kind of get started with you guys and find out more about what AutoBlocks is doing?
Yeah, definitely. The best way is to head over to our website, AutoBlocks.ai. And so we have a few different options there. We have a self-serve option if you want to try out with our Agent Simulate, building scenarios. Through our pricing page, you can find that. And there's also call to actions on there if you want to hop on a call, learn more about how we think about things, or just want some general guidance too. That's the fun part about what we do is all of our customers are building really cool and exciting things, and we love hopping on calls, hearing about what folks are up to, and seeing how we might be able to help.
No, I love that, and actually, it's the best sign off for us ever. The reason Kamal and I do this is we get to talk to and work with some incredibly talented people and see them do cool and interesting things, and that's absolutely true about what you guys are building over at AutoBlocks. So very much appreciate you joining us today. Very much appreciate you sharing your story, and looking forward to some amazing things going forward.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you both for having me, and yeah, really enjoyed the conversation today.
And thank you so much, Adam. We do actually also have an event on Tuesday next week with AWS. We're co-sponsoring an event on how to build an AI applications. I'll make sure I make a point to make a note on AutoBlocks, because there are several speakers who are coming from, like we have a speaker talking Bytes who are talking about model discovery, and then we have Data Robot who are talking about running these models, but nobody's talking about how do you now ship these reliable agents. So I'll definitely make a point to talk about that and mention that to that audience as I get a chance to.
Yeah, awesome.
Thanks, everybody. And for everyone listening live, join us in 2 weeks for episode 6. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.